All right, I'm coming to you with another in my series of forgotten band instruments. And today, I'd like to move to the lower brass, particularly the trombone. What's that, a trombone? My band still has trombones. What about a bass trombone? Well, yeah, my band has a bass trombone too. Does your band have a bass trombone like this? There's no valves in here. But I thought a bass trombone had to have valves so it could go low. Nope, this is the last of the true, quote unquote, bass trombones. This is the bass trombone in the key of G. That's right, if I play an open note here poorly, it's not a B flat, it's a G. This is a minor third lower than your standard tenor trombone, or modern bass trombone for that matter. It's a big boy, and it has an enormously long slide. In fact, you see me holding this. This is a handle so that I can get out to 7th position. If I were to play this with just my my arms, not holding the handle, that's 5th position, and my hand is all the way out. My arm's all the way out. To get all the way out there, I've got to extend this all the way out. And that's the lowest note. That's a C sharp, D flat too, right below the bass clef. So this right here is why this is a forgotten band instrument. It's much more difficult to play. It's also a very different sound. Do not take my playing as characteristic of it, but one thing that you will notice is if you're a trombone player, you know that you have small, medium, and large bore trombones. And then you've got bass trombones, which are even bigger in their bore size. This is a small bore. Not just a small bore bass, it's a small bore trombone, period. It says sub 500. When we talk about bore size, we talk about in inches, 500 being half an inch, 500 thousandths of an inch. This is more like 485 thousandths of an inch, which for a trombone is tiny. For example, my alto trumpet that's over here, its bore is 465 or 456, something like that. So it's like not too dissimilar from that of a trumpet in its bore size. The mouthpiece is a small bore mouthpiece. A bass trombone is considerably a modern bass trombone. I have to preface this. This is a bass trombone, but it's not a modern instrument. It's an old instrument. This instrument's almost 100 years old, made in about 1930. A modern bass trombone, like I said, is going to have a much, much larger bore. It takes a much, much bigger mouthpiece. In fact, finding a mouthpiece that fits this instrument and will give a characteristic sound, it's surprisingly difficult because you want a big cup in the mouthpiece, but with a small shank on the back. That's difficult. And this may not even be a great match to it. Now, where did you see this instrument? Well, long bass trombones, that's what we'll call it for now on, long bass trombones, started dying out pretty quickly. In France, they died out by the early 1800s, so that by the time of Berlioz in the 1820s, 1830s, the bass trombone had completely died out. In Germany, in Austria, the bass trombone, the long bass trombone had died out by the middle of the 1800s. 1860, 1870, you may still see a few lingering. In Czechia and areas like that, it would have lasted a little bit longer, but not in orchestras. It would have been in church music where you would have seen long bass trombones there. But where this instrument stuck around was in England and in other countries of the Commonwealth, Australia, New Zealand, Canada to some extent, though pretty unusual there. Why did they have it in the key of G though? G doesn't give you that many more notes. It only gives you 4 more notes past the B flat trombone. So the B flat trombone, let's see if I can do this, stops at G, D, D, and an E. This is going to give you an E flat, a D, and a D flat. This actually only gives you 3 more notes. For this much longer of an instrument, 3 more notes. That's it. E flat, D, and C sharp. This instrument, however, stuck around a lot longer. It stuck around in British orchestras to about 1960. A couple players lingered on a little bit after that. In bands, particularly brass bands, it stuck around a little bit longer. We know of some players who were using it into the 1980s. Maybe even a little longer than that, maybe up to 1990. But this instrument was completely defunct by then. The last instruments made were made in the late 1970s. This instrument is from about 1930, almost 100 years old. Why did it die out? Because technology improved. The modern bass trombone with its 2 valves, no handle, much bigger bore, not having to stretch out all the way to the next county, could play the music better and easier, and the player didn't have to work so hard. This instrument was set aside, and the player said, I can use this instrument. It's going to do my job so much easier. I don't have to worry about the distance between here and here for a minor second. However, what was lost was a long tradition of a different sound. This does not sound like a modern bass trombone. It's a very bright sound. It'll cut through the ensemble in a way that the modern bass trombone can't. Now, the modern bass trombone can absolutely cut through an ensemble. We've all been in a band like that. But this has a lot more bite to it. You can shatter some glass with this thing. Because it's small, you can pump the air. I can't, but an actual bass trombone player can. But it's a case of technology rendered this obsolete. We found better ways to do the same job easier. The long bass trombones were ultimately forgotten. There are a few players who will still bring an instrument like this out, but they're few and far between. Nobody studies the instrument anymore. If I put this in the hands of a trombone player, they may not know what to do with it. Yes, there are still 7 positions, but where are those 7 positions? They're now in a completely different place. They have to now manage this slide here. They have to worry about, oh, I have to change my airflow because this is such a tiny little bore. I mean, this is like a jazz trombone size. I mean, it's tiny, but long. It's ridiculously weird compared to what modern instruments are. But Ultimately, a forgotten band instrument. It never got used much in the United States. When I bought this instrument originally, it came from Canada, one of the countries in the Commonwealth. Um, you don't see these even pop up on eBay much anymore. Maybe one or two a year. They've become collector's items. People will go after them if they're in decent shape. This is actually a really beautiful horn. See if it'll focus in on some of the engravings here. That's all beautifully engraved. But it's not an easy instrument to play, unfortunately. So there you go. The bass trombone in the key of G, a forgotten band instrument. Let me know if you've ever played one. I'd be very curious how many people have actually played one or seen one used or know of a modern performance, like modern meaning like within the last 10, 20 years, where somebody has used this thing. It is so ungodly difficult to even hold. I've had to put 2 counterweights on here. There's no slide lock. You have to hold it. There was a reason these were abandoned. Shame, because it's a cool instrument and it's visually super impressive. Let me see if I can even back up so you can see how long this slide really is. And I don't think, it's not even going to get in the camera the full length. But anyway, the bass trombone in the key of G. Completely forgotten nowadays. Until next time, let me know what instrument you'd like to see next. If I've got it in my collection, I'll feature it.